So these infractions are different. They have the same penalty. But for the same reason, two people with the same penalty are not the same, okay? They should be treated differently. And from this, I want to conclude that, more importantly, two people are not the penalty they receive, okay? They are people. And if we start from this, if we understand that our role is not to accuse, but to be public defenders, if we understand that the people we have to issue DQs to are people and are not cheaters, they're not aggressive fist fighters, and so on, we approach the whole situation with a different mindset that can mean a world of difference for ourselves, the person, and other people involved. And this is what we're going to talk about today. I will focus on how to preserve people's dignity, on how to use diplomacy to develop a constructive conversation, and how to follow up all of this in the report, okay? To not create a difference between how we approached the whole conversation for the DQ, and to also manage to translate that in the report, okay? I'm drinking just some water. I'll be with you right back. Okay, so the first part is about preserving people's dignity. And the first point I'm going to talk about is the consideration that everyone believes themselves to be a hero. And the second one, to separate the concept of people from the mistakes they perform. Okay, so everyone is a hero. This part is very important to consider, that even if somebody does something wrong, very often they're not aware of that. Maybe they do something wrong for us, but maybe they believe they're doing something right. Okay, many villains also perceive themselves as heroes. Okay, so in the text chat, let's do this exercise. How can villains be considered good? You know, like, imagine an example in which a villain is actually good. Same as before. If somebody, okay, doing something for the greater good, that's a very common example. For Thanos, for example, most bioterrorists that want to save the world from overpopulation, exposing faults in the system, corruption, Norn, donating to charity to invoke tax loopholes, okay? Trying to protect their own people, right? From they're using the wrong means, but they're doing it for the good. Okay, we have some really good examples here. So even many villains perceive themselves as heroes, right? For greater purpose, serving their communities, and all the examples that were written in the chat, right? So now, if villains can perceive themselves as heroes, as heroes, right? And they have a hard time perceiving themselves as evil. Think about the effect this has on an average Magic player. If we point fingers on a 15-year-old and saying that they are evil and that we're giving them a DQ because they're evil, they're not just gonna ruin their tournament or their experience with Magic or their community. They're probably gonna feel very bad about themselves. And this is something we want to avoid at all costs with teenagers and with other people, okay? So we can avoid escalation by not giving this perception, okay? To separate the infraction that we as impartial judges assign to a tournament in violation of some rules and a personal judgment of the person, okay? Often it is the accusation of a person that leads to anger, not the card game, okay? Very often people get very heated up, not because of the consequences of their actions to the game, like they receive a game loss, whatever. But if the judge or the opponent points fingers to them, or they feel accused of acting as a cheater, that brings some very heated reactions. I don't know if this happened to other people, but some players, even when the opponent hints that they call the judge because they believe they were cheaters, they immediately start boiling up, even though they didn't do anything. Okay, so it's very important for this reason, especially in a situation as sensible as the one of a DQ, to do everything in private. Okay, to be sure that the person understands what's happening, and that you're separating the personal judgment that people are evil for doing, and the penalty of the DQ. Okay, accusations that are not made privately cannot be easily distinguished from bullying. Especially since we as judges are generally in a position of power. Okay, so in the moment somebody sitting at the table have us standing up, pointing fingers, saying you have to go away, you have to end your day because you're bad, that can be a very bad situation. Give me just a second as I catch up with the text chat. Okay, that is an interesting example from anime from Vince. Thanks for sharing. Back to accusations. I have a story for you about some DQ'd players' friends. So what happened? It was a vintage tournament, and a player had sleeves that were marked. Now, by definition, marked sleeves is not on purpose. It can be upgraded if if it's reasonable that the player noticing a pattern could take advantage, and it's upgraded further if we know they did it on purpose to take an advantage, right? So I'm just saying that these sleeves were marked, and also the player behaved in a way, he was playing dredge, that really made spectators think that he could predict the cards that were on top of his deck. He was dredging when other more expert dredge players would not have dredged, and vice versa. Okay, the player's whole line of defense, so to say, it is that he was a new player to the deck. It was borrowed and all of that. He even admitted to smoking a joint earlier that day, and he was not entirely sure what was happening. It doesn't matter how convincing the story was on or if this person cheated or not. For what I want to tell you, for the point I want to make now, is that this player got DQ'd. Okay. Afterwards, through other judge friends I had on Facebook, I got contacted by multiple friends of this player that saying, "Hey, are you the player that the judge that DQ'd this player? We believe this is very wrong. He is a great guy. He's at the moment he's unemployed. He doesn't have a partner. Magic is all he cares about. This really means a lot to him. How you can accuse him and all of that, right?" And they were very passionate about the situation. And I took my time and tried to explain to these players that I was just interpreting facts. By the way, I observed facts, listened to spectators, listened to everything. The data that I gathered showed that this player very probably knew what cards were on top of his deck. But it could have been whatever, right? It could have been whatever. And also based on those facts, I decided to issue a DQ. However, the fact that I issued a DQ to this player does not mean any judgment on this person's personality, identity, and so on and so forth. This player is welcome to write a statement to defend his position. If the appeal investigation committee will decide that my DQ was wrong, I will how to say that, I will accept that decision, and so on and so forth. And I really stress the fact that my decision was not a punishment for the person. I had no bad impression of them, and I really cared about the player community and so on. And the players really, the friends really understood this and appreciated the fact that if I was ill-intentioned, I wouldn't have spent that time on Facebook chats with all of them explaining that. And the players themselves were the ones to encourage the player to write a statement that he refused to write at the time of the DQ. And the players encouraged the DQ player to write a statement, and I believe this was a very good how to say ending to the situation. When we talk about preserving people's dignity, right? So far we discussed how everyone's a hero, and it's important even when we DQ to not try to crush people's dreams or to change their perception, their identity, right? Now we're talking about how they are not their mistakes. Okay, so this is a picture of a scientific failure of eugenics. It was this this pseudo-scientific attempt to try to see how like facial features and things like this could predict criminal behavior. Okay, if somebody had a bigger head, they were a criminal. If they had darker eyes, stuff like that. So this is to say that people are not born evil and people are not their mistakes. And I really want to stress on this. So it's our responsibility not to treat players like criminals, right? Here we have a picture of Tomohiro Saito. For who doesn't know, this player many years ago was DQ'd. And instead of being treated like a criminal, he was treated according to the rules at the time. After a DQ, depending on what you were DQ'd for, there is also a suspension period. And after the suspension period, that's it. Like in the same way, it should be also for prison systems around the world. I don't want to get into a conversation about this, but the point is that if there is a penalty, and it's not less, it's not more, we hope there is a reason why that penalty is that much. So if somebody got DQ'd and then was suspended and the suspension is over, then it is in the best interest of the community to not keep pointing fingers, to not, consider this person guilty for life. If they committed something so bad, well, there is prison for life sentences. If a respected body of judges decided that it was instead an infraction that deserved 6 months of punishment, then that's it. And I want to make this example because it is in the interest of the community to behave this way. People that have been either DQ'd for magic or put into prison and so far are the ones that received a very harsh lesson from life, and much more than the majority of us have a clearer idea of how much there is to lose, right? Of course, prison is terrible, but also for somebody that's a pro Magic player, like not being able to play on Magic, to compete, to see the community, and all of that is very problematic. It's a big part of their lives. For this reason, this player in particular, when the suspension was over, invested a lot back in the community and wanted to redeem themselves. And it is my belief that without the harsh lesson learned, they would not have been as enthusiastic about recreating the Japanese community, founding many shops, and so on. And now, like, managing a team that is one of the best pro teams that is around. So I want to make a little experiment here in the text chat. If you ever DQ'd someone, like this post, I'm gonna post now, just a second. Okay. Okay, I see that there's a good number of us that have had a DQ experience. Okay, cool. Let's you can keep on liking, but we move on to the next part. Now, if you believe that the person you DQ'd will repeat the same infraction they got DQ'd for, do nothing. Else, if you believe they will not be repeat offenders, can you take off your like from my post? Okay, I see the numbers going down. This means that some people DQ the other person, but they believe that they will not repeat that infraction, that they learned the lesson. Chris, if you DQ'd somebody, you should like my post above. But then, if you DQ'd and you believe they will not repeat the infraction, then can you please remove the like? The idea is a bit like if we were in the room, and I asked you all to raise your hands if you DQ'd, and then I asked you to put your hands down if you believe they will not repeat the infraction. Aruna, just go with the ones that they. If there is at least one that you DQ that you believe you would repeat, leave your hand up. Leave your like posted. Okay. So now the next question is, I hope you don't find it too cheesy, is that if you believe that they did what they did because they were evil, do nothing, else remove your like. I realize this requires some like hard, also maybe you've never thought back about these episodes before, after the DQ. And it's not relevant now, but I'm catching up with the text chat. Okay, cool. I see also people like describing in the chat the reasoning for like leaving their hand up for that. Of course, there are repeat offenders, and I like some descriptions. Like Chris Rumor says, some people really just didn't care. Alex Frank that says they did it for many reasons, but evil probably not. And Sean Johnson also makes a difference between evil and selfish behavior. I really like this last point, right? Because if you talk about a selfish behavior, it is a behavior, and this it separates, in my opinion, this person's acts from their identity. Okay, which is what I wanted to focus on here. That even if people do something that's very wrong, it really helps us to think that their behavior is not identical to their essence as a person. Why is this? Let me clarify this in case it's not clear. If you're a teacher in a classroom, and before you enter the classroom, the dean tells you, look out, all these kids are notorious cheaters, everybody's gonna cheat on the test. You're gonna go in there with the approach that I want to catch cheaters and I want to punish these kids, for not doing anything wrong. Whereas on the other hand, as judges should go to tournaments, if we enter the classroom and we watch out, and if a kid cheats, then they cheat and they will receive punishment for that. But if they don't, they will not. And even if they receive punishment, they will not have attached stigma lifetime for committing that mistake once. Then it's gonna have a more healthy mindset, in my opinion. Okay, Tim Matska, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, also leaves the benefit of doubt that this person might have changed their nature, but we don't know. And I also like Vince's point that says, once a player was DQ'd for cheating, was suspended, people will tend to watch their move and be watchful with that player. And I believe this is a good middle ground. Okay, it's the difference between being skeptic and being cynical. Okay, somebody that's cynical believes that things will go wrong and tends not to trust and so on. Whereas being skeptical means that I do not give respect without it being earned. I don't want to give you trust without you having earned it. But if I see that you can be somebody to trust, you can be somebody that I can like, and so on, I'm ready to change my mind. Okay, so perhaps where I'm going with this is that I suggest being skeptical and not cynical. Okay, in our approach towards the cues and approach towards players past and so far. Let's go on to part 2. In part 2, we'll explain how to use diplomacy to develop a constructive conversation. Now, treating people fairly will not make them agree to be DQ'd, right? Like all I'm saying so far might even embolden them, right? If they have their dignity preserved and we make all this effort to say, look, these are the rules, but I'm not judging you personally, players might feel, like stronger by all the attention we're saying and saying, but then if you believe that I'm a good person, that why are you accusing me of being DQ'd? Okay, my suggestion is to not play this game. Okay, instead you should separate the people and the problem. You should refer to objective standards, which in our case are the rules. For example, you can say, dear player, if your opponent did to you what we're talking about, what would you think? And you pause for a second and you let this person think, oh well, if I were sitting on this side of the table and that other person shuffled in that very fishy way without letting me cut, or if that other person always had cards stick together when they were drawing and now suddenly they have one more card that they can account for, and so on and so forth. You can also make this person at least pause and think that perhaps what they have done, seen from the outside, doesn't look good. And this is, I'll stress again, that it's important not to call people cheaters because that's a personal judgment, With the example I just gave, to ask people to look at their actions from the outside, to look from how their opponent would look at their actions, you avoid people getting defensive. And after that, you can tell them that they committed cheating by the rules. Okay, that this is the way their actions are labeled by the rules, and there is a penalty for that, But if you think about sports, right? You can also make an example for this, a case for this. There are some sports in which touching another player in a certain way, at football or at basketball, I'm talking about European soccer, right? is faulty. Whereas in other sports, for example, rugby or American football, like crushing people to the ground, sometimes it's perfectly legal. Okay, so it's just a matter of phrasing, not phrasing, of adding the right perspective to what is happening. According to the rules, what you have done amounts to cheating or stalling or whatever. And for that reason, we apply this penalty. I'll catch up with the chat for a second. Okay. Another question that you can ask is, dear player, have you thought about the consequences of your action? Okay. So imagine a player that is treated fairly, that says, "Look, I had the best intentions." Right, but have you thought about the consequences? And I have another story here. This one I called before I tell this story, I have two good points here. I like Luca Cassoni's suggestion that instead of saying disqualifying you, I'm removing you from the tournament, which is also useful. Aryan, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. What king behavior? What is it referred to? I'm not sure what king behavior means. Okay. So framing the behavior in the right way is called keying. Okay, thank you very much. So what happened in this situation? A couple of years ago, rolling a dice was a DQ, even if people did it not intentionally. Okay, just rolling a dice, the penalty was a DQ. Very often, we DQ'd players that were really ignorant of the situation. You know, that's what they did at their local game store, maybe. So we had these two cheerful players that roll a dice at the penultimate round. A spectator calls. I go to them and I ask, "Hello, I've been told that your match is a draw, and when time was over, you rolled the dice. Is that true?" And one player says yes, and the other person says yes. And I look at them, and it was a horrible situation back then in which you had to sit down with the players and explain that for rolling dice, the penalty was a DQ. What happened? At the beginning, they didn't like my explanation for that because they saw that as ridiculous, especially since they didn't know what were the consequences of all of that. And as a side note, judging policy at large has evolved since then to account for these type of situations. But I explained to them what were the consequences of the action, why was policy written the way it was at the time, and how a draw that was not reported as a draw changed the rankings of the tournament and could impact cuts to top 8 and so far. For this reason, they had to be removed from the tournament, as Luca says, and I had to deal with other stuff at the tournament, starting the new round or something, and I left them with another judge. The thing is that when I came back to collect their statement, they wrote a single statement. They wrote a forehand statement saying basically, we were at the tournament, we were playing, it was a draw, we rolled dice, we didn't know it was wrong, the judge explained things to us, we are sorry. And then they both signed the same sheet of paper and they gave it back to me. And the next day, when I met one of it was a Nationals or a Grand Prix or something. Another player met me in the room and he made eye contact, and then he got closer to me smiling, and then he high-fived me. And I was very surprised by this reaction from players that I DQ'd, right? But I believe that I managed to leave a good impression to them, and to apply this idea that I was not angry with them. I definitely didn't consider them bad people, and so on and so forth. I'm catching up with the text chat and hydrating a bit more. Cool. It's important when separating people and the problem. It does not mean forgetting the relation with the people. Okay, so although I stressed on how their mistake had nothing to do with my perception of their identity as people and so on and so forth, I still made a human connection with them, and this is something you cannot delegate. For part 3, the last part, if you have questions or anything, just shoot them on the chat. I have an eye on it. We're talking about how to follow up with all of this in the report. So the best way to preserve people's dignity and give them, also a fair chance at defending themselves, even when you believe that the DQ was correct and so far, is to approach the writing of the report in a certain way. If somebody has specific questions on this, I am aware that now tournament organizers are the one ultimately responsible for filing in the DQ report, but many of them are not expert on how to deal with this, and having the support of a judge or the advice of a judge is very helpful. And between you and me right now, in times of COVID-19 and tournament organizers going through a bad period, having losses, and of course trying to minimize expenses, this is one of those situations in which you can present your services as useful to a tournament organizer, and explain to them that you are also somebody that knows how to deal with bad situations and how to manage them properly. So how to deal with this in the best way possible? First, you focus on dry facts. And by dry facts, I mean talking just about the status quo. When you arrived at the table, if it was a gameplay situation, like what were the life totals, what happened, what was the situation in which somebody said blocked but then actually took it back, or how too many cards are in hand, all of that, the status quo. After that, you talk about the trigger, and it's important to separate these two things. The trigger is the thing that was out of place, the thing that did not convince you or the opponent or the spectator, the reason why the investigation that ultimately led to the DQ started. This is the trigger. Then you talk about the investigation, the questions you asked, the lead you were following, what was your hypothesis. I really want to believe this person is innocent, and to try to prove that they did not have too many cards. I looked for fetch lands, and I looked for cards like Preordain or Ponder to account for like so many cards extra. But ultimately, even if I tried that, and I tried to ask also the previous player's opponents, this is another example, if it's true that they shuffled and never presented the deck to the opponent to cut it, I tried to ask all the previous players, but all of them confirmed that they never were offered the deck for the cut, and so on and so forth. I tried my best, but this person was committed an infraction of a certain type. Now, after you talk about the facts, the trigger, and the investigations. Separately, you talk about your impressions. At the end, you talk about your impression, and it's very important to separate those from the facts. This is important because the committee that evaluates again can see from the facts that you presented, can take away their impressions. Maybe based on the same facts, they reach different conclusions. Or if they reach the same conclusion on the same facts before getting to read your impressions and your decision, then that is a further confirm personal judgment of Albert being malicious. Maverick says, I noticed the game didn't proceed, so I investigated further. Marta says something very similar. Francesco underlines the fact that the person was 1-0, so we could consider that they had an advantage. And Craig adds something a bit more poetic. Okay, I see you had the general idea. This is what I asked you in the text chat. Also, alternative ways to say it. Another idea can be Albert plays very fast. Imagine, Albert plays very fast. He flicks cards in the hand very often because he plays fast, he's all agitated. And spectators see him drop cards by mistake all the time because he flicks them in his hand, he plays very fast, he drops permanents on the board already tapped and attacking, you know? And after 1-0, all of this stopped. Okay? In this type of situation, if you present facts like this, and you also point out that there were spectators that could confirm this approach, if after 1-0 this behavior changes, then that's very, very suspicious. Okay, so you give these facts so that the committee or anybody else reading this can make their own conclusions. Be aware of your bias when presenting a report. You know, there's of course there is merit to trying to be nice to the person, respecting them, and all of that when you do the DQ in real life. But if you write a report in which you accuse them behind their back in a certain way of every possible crime, then you really haven't followed through. You really haven't done the good job to be an impartial judge. After that, there's the statement of the player. Be sure not to read it before typing your own. And really try to find ways to get this statement. It might involve the participation of other people. In the example I said before, trying to involve friends of the player to get it, or other judges that are friendlier. The players ultimately will be grateful that they had the opportunity to defend themselves on with their own statement. Now for some fun times. These are some real examples. Don't try to read it. It's just showing how this example of a report is not the way you should perceive. There's no separation between the points, and this is not really helpful to do any of this. And in the end, it was a split for concession. Like all of this was to describe a split for concession. This, if you can see, it's like 3 pages full of text that Matteo, who lent me this report, has no clue what it was about, even after reading it and rereading it. Okay, so try to, when you write a report or you help somebody write a report, to make it look nice. If you preserve people's dignity, if you use diplomacy to develop a constructive conversation, and if you follow all of that up in the report, I believe we can deal with a difficult situation as that of a DQ in the best interest for the player, for the judges, for the TO, and for the Magic community in general. Thank you for your participation. I believe my time is officially up. Like, this is the start of the 10 minutes between seminars. If you need to go, by all means, grab a glass of water, relax. I'll be around here if you have more questions.